welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show where we like to duke it out on the issues. I'm Robin Adair, with me, as usual, the Croatian sensation John Jurisic. And, right off the top, there's going to be a lot of rumbling. I've got to warn you, there's lots of things that I'm pretty miffed about. And one of them, a bunch of very wealthy, self-entitled, city-dwelling jackasses, they're millionaires. They're telling our First Nations how they should conduct themselves and how they should be making a living themselves. And I can't get over it, John. I'm really, really irritated by this.
This is fantastic. I love it when Robin Adair gets pissed, as I do likely more frequently than I should. When I saw this new ad starring William Shatner, which was produced by Ryan Reynolds, come on, guys, I couldn't believe it. Captain Kirk swearing at the First Nations who operate fish farms? Are you kidding? The feds are closing their farms in 5 years, and a lot of Indigenous folks will be out of work. Here's what we're talking about, Robin.
For almost a century, I've been a kind, decent Canadian. It's the Canadian way. But when I see what open net salmon farming is doing to the environment and wildlife, I just can't be Canadian about it any longer. So, repeat after me. Off! Open net pen salmon farms! Your salmon farms are up our wild salmon population. It's a state on our nation. Now you ever go?
Get sideways, you open net.
Yes!
Get bent, you sack.
Ooh!
Open net salmon farms.
There you got it, baby.
Open pen farms should really reconsider their practices.
What the Kirk McLean? Come on, man, you're a hockey player.
Sorry, your unnatural practices suck.
That's great! Well, that sounded mean as hell. Hey. Hear that, birds? Yeah, go Canada!
This was supposed to be comedy. It's not funny. It's not funny at all when a bunch of rich millionaires tell people in First Nations communities, isolated communities where it's very hard to find gainful employment, how they should be conducting themselves. No one argues that there's ways that we can make fish farming much safer, both to wild salmon and to the environment in general. It costs money. It's expensive to make the transition. Maybe that's what should be focused on, not pointing fingers and swearing at our First Nations. And why not help promise to help finance closed pens? And they are open pens now. They could close the pens. That costs a lot of dollars. And yeah, it's expensive, but it would provide First Nations with hope and opportunity in the future. And isn't that what reconciliation's supposed to be about? That would be a positive message.
Outstanding. Well said. I completely agree with you. I've spent years working with local First Nations to build sustainable employment opportunities. And shutting down all of the fish farms without a plan B is simply not responsible. If we believe in true reconciliation, you and I do, it means more than speeches, t-shirts, platitudes. It means economic opportunity. It means jobs. Again, simply demanding change without support or plan, not responsible, Robin.
Absolutely, John. And, speaking of responsible, what's responsible when it comes to free speech in this country? It seems to have gone out the window. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedom. It ensures that people can openly express themselves in public. We have the freedom of expression in this country. And people are picking sides in this. So we have the NDP and the left basically standing side by side with the pro-Hamas, the pro-Palestinian movement that are marching around the legislature screaming about genocide and apartheid, and they are against the state of Israel, many of them calling for Israel to be driven from the river to the sea. And people stand by that and say that's free speech. That should be protected, especially people on the NDP side of the ledger, to the point that Selena Robinson, who was a minister in that government, had to step out, sitting as an independent. She's been driven out of politics. And at the same time now we have these same folks in an uproar because there is a conference, or has been a conference in Victoria. It's run a couple of years now. And this conference was set up to basically talk about open dialogue, but from maybe a right-wing perspective. Some might argue from a far-right perspective. It's a program set up by Reclaim Canada. It's the Reclaim Canada Conference, and this is what it was about.
I think they need to start paying attention to what's going on around them and what the government's doing behind closed doors. It will affect them someday, and they need to see this before it's too late.
No doubt, an ongoing energy in the country that realizes that significant change must take place.
So as I mentioned, for a second straight year, this We Unify conference has taken place at the Victoria Conference Centre, and it's drawn delegates. It's also drawn a lot of heat. And some of these speakers admittedly have backgrounds in the anti-vax movement, in the truckers movement. And these aren't necessarily movements that I advocate or feel are great, but don't they have the right to at least express themselves, to say what they think and their opinions in an open democratic democracy? And isn't that really the purpose of charter rights and freedoms in its essence? And we have Grace Lohr, who is the minister, who is actually also the MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill, who led the campaign against this conference. She had to try to shut it down. She tried to shut it down. She actually went online talking about how she didn't approve of this kind of free speech.
Every member of our community deserves to be who they are as they are. They deserve safety, joy, connection, and community, and hate has no place. I encourage the city to use all its available tools to stop this conference. We are the city with more gender diverse, non-binary, and trans people than any other city across the country. And as elected officials, that is an important privilege and responsibility.
Okay, I get it. This is a minefield. These are all very tough issues. And John, you and I think, have always spoken very favorably about showing compassion for people that are from our minorities, and also from the trans movement, the gay movement, all the different movements that are out there. They need to be heard. They need to be seen. Huge sympathy for that. I don't like hardline from the left. I don't like hardline from the right. And I hate seeing it expressed this way. What I've always stood for is open dialogue. That is freedom of expression. That is the freedom that our forefathers have fought for, and it's something that the Rumble Room advocates, and that's what we think should be going forward in public discourse, is ideas should be shared.
Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, free speech is not hate speech. Free speech is not violent speech. Free speech is free speech. These are interesting times. We're seeing the rise of a conservative movement across the country, across the globe, for that matter. It's happening every community in Canada. Never thought that would happen. We somehow missed this. That flag never really rose during the by-election in Langford a year and a half ago. Sure, we predicted Ravi Parmar would win the NDP seat, John Horgan's old riding. Come on, slam dunk. But we totally missed that the BC Conservative would finish a strong second, especially with such a strong BC Green support over there. However, this Conservative group, their support keeps on growing week by week.
Yeah, we really have missed the boat in terms of predicting this, but we're certainly willing to acknowledge that it's taking place. And interesting to see John Rustad speak at the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. He talked about a new focus on agriculture in British Columbia. He talked about promoting nuclear energy, which is something Andrew Weaver, we've had him on the show. He thinks that's a great idea. And he's also been talking a lot about the need for rehabilitation for our people addicted to drugs and for the mentally ill. We've gone full into decriminalization and safe supply. Where are the beds? Where's the rehabilitation? Isn't that the most important thing that should be taking place? Shouldn't that be the top priority? And we even have people speaking now that you haven't heard from in the past or haven't heard from for a long time, like Glenn Clark, the former NDP premier back in the 90s. Remember him? Fast ferries, all of that. Went into business with Jimmy Pattison. And, he has learned a lot through the years about what works and doesn't work in government. And what he's saying now, his advice to this current government, and I think it's good advice, is move away from this whole idea of wealth redistribution to wealth creation. It's time to get the economy moving, time to get people working. Because if the NDP doesn't get into that boat, it's going to sail, and the people behind the helm of that new boat are going to be the Conservatives, because that's what they're talking about, and that's what the public wants to hear.
And that sailing is getting full wind these days, isn't it? Now, here to talk more about the rise of the Conservative movement, some background, both in BC and across the country. It's a long-time Conservative staffer who's worked for several Conservative premiers and was once a ministerial assistant in the Gordon Campbell government. Why don't we just introduce and let's zoom in Michael Harrison.
Joining us now in the Rumble Room for the first time is an old political hand from the BC legislature from years gone by. Welcome, Michael Harrison.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be on the Rumble Room. Listen, it's exciting for me. This is better than Jeopardy. Okay, I get to spend some time with media legend Robin Adair and the Ed McMahon of the Rumble Room himself, John Jurisic.
Outstanding.
Okay?
Oh,
Croatian.
You're regular.
Complimented enough on this show. That's
You're
great.
regular every week.
You can come on all the time, Michael. You can have the show. You can have the show. So let's open things up. You were formerly a ministerial chief of staff back in the Gordon Campbell era, and that party was the BC Liberals. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now the BC United under Kevin Falcon. And, if the polls are to be believed, BC United is in really tough shape right now. Are you surprised that this has happened? I mean, here was the party that was in power for 16 years, and now it is really on life support.
I'm not surprised so much as I've been watching it with awe. Actually, what's been happening. I think if you look at Gordon Campbell back in 2001, I think people tend to forget that he was a populist conservative. And I think, Robin, you would remember this. Back in 2001, he ran on lower taxes, he ran on privatization, he ran on open cabinet meetings. You remember that? And I think over the last 16 years, the BC Liberals and BC United Party have become the party of the establishment. They've become the party of big business. And I think what happened is they forgot about the blue-collar working class. And what happened was when John Rustad got kicked out of the party, he discovered this nice open space where, gosh, I can establish myself as a right-wing populist. Because after all, the NDP has also given up on the blue-collar working class, right? They're not the party of workers. They're the party of university administrators, a managerial elite. They're the party of university professors, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at it, it's not surprising that John Rustad has tapped into this political space where you do have a tradition of radical right-wing populism. So I think that's basically what's happened in the last 2 years or so.
Okay, great to have you on the program, Michael.
Thank you.
And great introduction. Thank you. Hey, I understand you worked in Victoria for several years.
I did, yes.
So you know the political scene quite well. Okay, so why, in your opinion, though, have the New Democrats been able to hold on to power with majority governments back in 2001, they held only 2 seats? What are they doing right? And are they unbeatable in October?
Well, I think that they have the advantage of the fact that the free enterprise vote is going to be split. I don't think there's any question about that between the BC Conservatives and BC United. But what's interesting to me, John, is how vulnerable I think the BC NDP vote actually is. And if you look at David Eby, I think you guys might agree with me on this. He kind of reminds me of Gordon Campbell, a sort of bloodless technocrat who's not that, no, but think about it for a sec, who's not that great with retail politics. I don't get the sense from David Eby that he's all that good with crowds.
Yeah, he's no John Horgan.
Yeah, that's right. And I think what you're seeing is that because of that split in the free enterprise vote, you're probably going to see David Eby return to power. But there's clearly this untapped populist conservative vote that John Rosted is himself tapping into, and I think that's probably the source of his success.
You know, we've had Kevin Falcon on the show, and we like Kevin Falcon. He's smart, he's personable, he knows a lot
in the past.
He's got a big resume. He's done a lot of work and a lot of good work over the years in government, and now in opposition, he is struggling. He's having a lot of time. Wasting a lot of time, I think, almost trying to get people to know what BC United is instead of working on the campaign. And I think it's a struggle for him. He was just in front of the Chamber of Commerce recently and said, I'm going to win this next election. I'm going to get a majority, which seems, well, I guess he's got to say things like that if he's rallying the troops. But what do you think Kevin Falcon's done wrong?
I don't think Kevin Falcon has done anything wrong. I think it's probably going to really frost his ass when you look at his accomplishments. I think you had Sheila Orr on recently who was talking about the fate of Kevin Falcon. When you look at Kevin Falcon's career, here's a guy who's done everything right. You know, he came in the big wave of 2001. He was a cabinet minister in the first government of Gordon Campbell. He becomes the anointed successor of Gordon Campbell, or he runs for leader in 2010. He misses narrowly to Christy Clark. And then he does the team of rivals thing, where he becomes a finance minister, I believe, for Christy Clark. Again, very prudent budget making, balanced budgets, all the rest of it. Then makes the next good move and says, look, I want to create some room between myself and Christy Clark. Does that, makes a lot of money in the private sector. Comes back after the Wilkinson, disastrous reign of Wilkinson, wins the party leadership, says, I'm going to renew the party. And then out of the depths of conservative reaction, there's nonetheless, we see John Rosted rise up by total surprise after he gets tossed out of the party, hitting a hot button issue, which was, of course, the carbon tax, I believe. I think he was criticizing the carbon tax the time he got kicked out of the party. And as I said before, John Rosted, in turns, discovers this space where he can kind of reignite a long-term tradition in BC politics, right-wing, blue-collar style populism.
But didn't Kevin Falcon also identify that space? I mean, why is he given the roadmap to the Conservatives?
Because Robin, as I said before, the BC United Party is the party of big business now, right? It's the party of the establishment. And I think there's a reluctance to kind of adopt some of those hot button issues that John Rosted is willing to go there on, right? Whether it's canceling the BC carbon tax, whether it's raising questions about safe supply, whether it's crime, he seems to be far more comfortable taking up these issues as opposed to a lot of people in the BC United Party.
Michael, it's no secret that you're a longtime federal conservative, besides serving in Gordon Campbell's government.
Yes, I'm a longtime conservative hack, is what you're saying, John, is it?
Robin wrote hack, but I was trying to be more polite. You've worked for conservative premiers in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario. Yeah. In your opinion, why is this federal conservative message resonating right now? Why is it reaching those blue collar types? And are you a fan of Pierre Poilievre's combative style?
I think Pierre Poilievre has been successful for the very same reason John Rosted seems to be successful, is because he's hitting those issues that people care about, whether it's affordability, whether it's crime. even healthcare to some degree. I know that John Rust was talking about that to some degree, and that's a big issue as well. So I think it's successful for Pierre Poilievre because he's been laser focused on those issues, right? And he's ignoring issues like social conservatism, for example, or trans issues, rights, or gay rights, things of that nature. He basically wants to focus in directly on economic issues. I think that's a strength of the Tory brand. It always has been, and Pierre Poilievre recognizes that.
You know, it's interesting you say that. He's really not said very much about this 66% that's being tacked on to anybody with capital gains over
Right.
250,000. And I know the Liberals are throwing this out, I believe, as a wedge issue. And we just had the federal finance minister on saying, you know, if you don't believe in this, you don't believe in a free Canada where its fairness is the most important thing. And we're going to be turning our backs on democracy if we don't go after that tiny percentage of people that have money that they be penalized. The whole idea of making money and getting out there and being productive is sort of being shot in the butt because people are saying, let's create this egalitarian world. Now, Trudeau's not backing off. Do you think he's going to hang on to this message, or is this just a prelim to him taking his big walk in the snow and somebody else stepping in?
So if you've noticed, and I think you may well have being political junkies, that Justin Trudeau's been full throttle on a whole lot of announcements. I can't turn on the TV set without seeing Justin Trudeau on there making an announcement, right? I'm on my social media feed. There's Justin Trudeau making an announcement. So they've been desperately trying to turn their numbers around by putting forward Justin Trudeau, who I think they think is still their best asset, right? But here's the thing. The needle hasn't moved at all. And I think this latest attempt to try and bracket Pierre Poilievre with the capital gains issue is just another attempt to try and do that and put him on the defensive. But really, when you think about it, does anyone really care? I mean, it's a parliamentary move. It's interesting, but does anyone at the end of the day really give a shit whether or not Pierre Poilievre supports capital gains tax or not? He's not the government. So if you look at it at 30,000 feet and you look at the Liberal government, what you're going to say is, oh, look, they're applying another tax, which is what the capital gains tax is all about. I know they're trying to demonize the wealthy. They're trying to do the class warfare thing. But let's be honest. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on people who have tuned out of the Justin Trudeau show.
Interesting to hear from Michael Harrison. And, you know, John, despite all of this, I still think David Eby and the NDP are in a very strong position to be reelected next fall. I think this is their election to lose. I think they should win again handily. But I also think that the BC United's in terrible shape. The BC Conservatives could very well be a very strong opposition party in British Columbia politics and be here for a long time. And who'd have thung it? Anything can happen in BC politics.
Yeah, love it. And it does. No kidding. Hey, next week we have Dan McTeague joining us to talk about the carbon tax, which he hates. I don't know who doesn't. Natural gas, which he says is a ticket to prosperity. And nuclear power, which he says will ensure massive power in the decades and centuries ahead.
And Dan McTeague is the head of the Canadians for Affordable Energy. He also happens to head up the Gas Price Wizard. And in that context, we thought, well, it's a little preamble because we're going to have a longer interview with Dan McTeague next week. But we thought as a preamble, let's get his prediction on where gas is going this summer at the pumps. Is it going up? Is it going down? Let's talk to Dan.
It looks like American suppliers, refiners, are churning out plenty of gasoline. It looks like their crude to rack margins are really good. And, you know, they're making 20, 30 cents a gallon. That's better than what we've seen in the past. That means that for now, there are no major signs of any disruption. I don't see any hurricane activity. I know there's some out there that are waiting for their hurricane. It's all about climate change. Yeah, hurricanes happen. They've been going on for a couple million years in the U.S. Gulf Coast in particular. Save it until that happens. I think it's smooth sailing. We're probably going to see an increase between now and July 1st, probably in the tune of about 7 or 8 cents a liter in BC. I note that Vancouver will be going up. Let's see, we're looking at price increases to about $1.87. You were as low as $1.85, 84 on the weekend. That's about as far as we're going to go. And that's true of all of North America. It's very quiet right now. And I consider it calm before the storm because the market has to readjust one way or another. If you look at what's happened, though, the price of everything continues to escalate, at least on the energy side. And if we look at fundamentals, supply and demand, on the supply side of oil, I'm not so convinced that we're in great shape. I think American producers are going to start to slip. And if Canadian oil producers continue to be denied or hamstrung by their government and other organizations and fanatics, especially at the federal level, then the world could be in a lot of trouble. But for now, let's enjoy this because you're paying at this time about 15 cents a liter less than what you were paying this time last year in Vancouver.
And Victoria, we're just a slightly more reasonable price because we don't have the transit.
The 184. Yeah.
Great to hear from Dan McTeague, and we'll have much more from him next week. All sorts of energy issues top of mind. But for now, it's the end of the Rumble Room for another week. John, could you quickly tell our beloved viewers how they can follow this show and enjoy the Rumble Room and become part of the Rumble Room family?
Absolutely. There's so much news going on that it's just overwhelming me. Like you don't even, anyway, we're trying to cover it all. And we're blessed and honored to have over 2 million viewers since we started, and growing every time. So thank you all for watching. And how do you do that? Join our Twitter page, which is robust. And guess what? Rumbling. Facebook, YouTube, as well as a podcast if you just want to listen to us while you're running around, exercising, riding your e-bike. And of course, there is, we're on Instagram. We are on TikTok. So with a click of the button, boom, subscribe, boom, like, boom, share. Talking about fascinating drama. Oh my gosh, too bad. The Oilers gave it their best shot. And we're so appreciative. We love it. Provided extraordinary drama. What would be even more dramatic, Robin, is if the Canucks did the same thing next year. Go Canucks!
Absolutely, John. Wouldn't I love to see the Vancouver Canucks hoist that Stanley Cup? Maybe if I live another 50 years, it'll happen.
Well, Robin, if I live that long, I will still be Yanni Juricic, your Croatian sensation.
And free as a bird, Johnny, free as a bird. I'm Robin Adair, and I'm also feeling free to rumble on.